Welcome to Purdue Crop Chat, a regular podcast from Hoosier Ag Today and the Purdue University Extension Service, featuring Purdue Extension soybean specialist Dr. Shaun Casteel and Extension corn specialist Dr. Dan Quinn.
Hi, I'm CJ Miller with Hoosier Ag Today, on location at Commodity Classic in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm your fill-in host for the Purdue Crop Chat Podcast, filling in for Eric Pfeiffer, who is on assignment. Should we say where he is, by the way? Should we tell everyone? So he is on assignment. He is actually with the Indiana Ag Leadership Program through Agra Institute, and he's on a 2-week tour of Africa.
That's right.
He was in Guyana last week. He's in Kenya this week, and no doubt Eric will be providing us a full report of all the activities during his 2-week bender.
I think so. I think we're going to flip it the next episode that Dan and I are going to be the moderators, and we're going to be pestering him with all the questions like he does. But how does he say? He's like, I'm the one just asking dumb questions. That's what we're going to do. We're going to ask the dumb questions for him.
Absolutely. Well, and certainly he's full of those dumb questions, so usually on this podcast. But so I'm filling in, and we're going to have a great time because we're here at Commodity Classic, and you talk about one heck of a trade show. My guest, by the way, we're talking, well, I should say the stars of the Purdue Crop Chat Podcast. We're here with Soybean Shaun Casteel with Purdue Extension. You are the soybean specialist with Purdue Extension. Dan Quinn. He is the Purdue Extension corn specialist. And we have a special guest all the way from Huntington County in northeastern Indiana. He's also the vice chair of the Indiana Soybean Alliance, Brian Warpup. He farms in Huntington and Wells counties, and he's our special guest here today on the Purdue Crop Chat Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Brian. First things first, let's talk about what's going on here at Commodity Classic. I'm kind of curious with all of the trade show space, with all the seminars, with everything that's going on, Shaun and Dan, first things first, your major takeaways from what you've seen so far. This is day number 2 as we record this podcast here on Thursday. Today is the 26th, if I'm not mistaken, of February.
Didn't know there's going to be a pop quiz on what date it was.
Yeah, but this is going to air. People may be watching this. Who knows when they're watching this? What is tripping your trigger, as to put it, the phrase that you put it, as you walk around and talk to different folks across the trade show floor, Shaun?
Yeah, so the thing with the Commodity Classic for me is just the conversations in general, whether it's with industry, with Brian and farmers, or farmers outside of our state, our colleagues. It's just, learning from each other. That's my big takeaway is just I always enjoy, what did you learn this last season? What are you doing on your farm? I grew up a farm kid in Illinois, and I always said that farmers are the first researchers, right? We're figuring things out on our own farm. And to have the conversations with growers that are doing something that I'm not even doing, haven't seen, haven't heard. And so that's always fun to do that and to learn. So those kind of conversations have been good. In terms of industry, trade show side of things, plenty of iron to enjoy, right? It's fun to see that. On the soybean side, there's a new product that's just got launched last fall that's got labeled that's really exciting as a potential for some seed treatment with our SDS and SCN and even Red Crown route with Syngenta's Victrado. So, there's some fun things out there they're coming that can provide some solutions. And it's nice to have those, not just to have something that gets sold to the farmer.
Dan, how about you? Is that what's stoking your furnace as you walk around the trade show floor?
That's a new one. I'm going to take that one too.
Wow. I enjoy Commodity Classic, I would say, even beyond the trade show, just as a whole. It's a great time for, like as Shaun said, we get to see a lot of people in all aspects of what we get to do in our role, whether it be our colleagues, right? We have a lot of meetings with our agronomist colleagues. I get to see a lot of farmers that I've interacted with, and just before our podcast, I had a conversation with a farmer from Georgia that I had met for the first time down in Texas, Austin, Texas, earlier this month. Those type of things, and then a lot of industry. We have a lot of industry partners and things that we work with. So what I enjoy is it's great someone in my position to just see what is coming to the market, obviously what is already out there, but what is new, what is happening, what is the conversations, what are the ideas, because a lot of times, farmers and consultants ask us about different things out here, so it's good for us to have a handle and understanding, what are the farmers interested in, what do they want to see, So, I think I always enjoy the innovation in equipment and the technology, right? I think the big talk is the seed orientation stuff and precision, and I think that's, it's very unique in terms of engineering and the way that, just some of that innovation that they're doing, and, some of the new products and stuff. So, it's always pretty exciting to see what's new. I'm always curious what's new, what's exciting, is there something, innovative that's coming that maybe we can, be able to look at, and then allow some of our farmers to push it a little bit further, or be more efficient, or, improve their operation. So, I just enjoy this meeting as a whole every year.
And Brian, I'll ask you the same question. What do you see here as you walk through Commodity Classic? Or let's say before you came in here to San Antonio, before flying in, what did you have on your mind in terms of, I want this takeaway from this trade show?
Well, I'll echo a little bit of what these two have said. It's about the networking, it's about the collaboration of fellow farmers. Whether you're from North Carolina, Indiana, Texas, we're all farmers, but we all do things so differently. And so it's really nice to see what somebody else is doing on a couple hundred miles away, what you're doing. And this trade show here, it's the centerpiece, but yet there's so much around the trade show as far as education, again, networking, collaboration, just meeting with people, and just looking at it as a knowledge and education tour almost for these next couple days. So I came to, this is the first show I came to was in 2020, and it was in San Antonio, and I've been here every year since. It is, I've said it before to other people, it's kind of the Super Bowl of my world.
Sure.
And so everybody's here. It's a big event. You can talk to anybody in the industry. I think that's what I look forward to when at the trade show. Whatever company it is, you get their full attention. And it's great conversation. It could be 5 minutes, it could be an hour. And normally in my world, you don't get that attention, I guess, and that conversation. So that's probably the biggest takeaway coming to Commodity Classic that I have.
Well, and with that too, right? You get to talk. So if you want to really get into the nuts and bolts of whether it's truly nuts and bolts iron or it's products, or you get to talk to the one that really knows it, not the one that's selling it, right? And so then it's more than a sales pitch. It's okay. Tell me the why.
There's no hearsay. I heard this.
Yes.
You can actually talk to the person who knows.
Exactly.
And not the hearsay.
And I appreciate that very thing, because well, tell me how it works, or what are the shortcomings. And what's nice about it for me is that, and I think they do it with growers as well, it's like, okay, here's what we're seeing. Here's some things that aren't on these glossy prints that you should know the background of. And so I think that's the nuance that we gain here.
Yeah, a lot of the booths, right? It's not just, some folks that they're hired to do the selling of the advertisement. Right? A lot of times you walk into these booths, it's the chemist, it's the director of agronomy, it's the engineer,
the person who knows.
Yeah, that works on it. So you get to have those interfacing conversations, and it's great. A lot of them, they're people that I've interfaced with too. Shaun and I will do a lot of research work that maybe is behind the scenes on something that is coming up. Working with them. The other side of it is the commodity boards, right? I mentioned, again, we kind of get everybody in one space. We do work interface with the commodity boards all the time. Not only you get the state boards, we get the national boards that are here. And so I would say the people you want to talk to are here, and that's what makes it great about this.
Well, and you mentioned the educational opportunities, because Shaun, if I'm not mistaken, you led a seminar on day one of Commodity Classic. What can you tell us about that seminar and some of the feedback that you received from soybean producers who were part of that seminar?
Sure. Yeah. So it's no secret in the last 10 years or so that a big play of my program and across the Midwest has been sulfur spray on soybeans. And not every acre needs it, and that's the hard part. Is okay, which farm needs it, which one doesn't, but to see an application and a treatment that's like, it has a sizable impact on those fields that need it, right? We're talking 8-10 bushels in soybeans, which is crazy to think of, and on up from there. But outside of the nutrition, we've been kind of learning some newer things. And so this was probably one of your first years, Dan. I don't know if you remember this or not. I was taking you around to my sulfur work up at La Crosse, right? And we just had too much rain and just saturated. It was nasty. We had phytophthora taken out.
He was showing me what a soybean was.
Really?
What it shouldn't be is what it was. So we had our muck boots on and everything, walk around. And this is a sandy loam field, and we still have to have muck boots. But just phytophthora was taking it out. And I said, let's take a look at this, because I want to show them the sulfur deficient site that I do a lot of work. But you had phytophthora just taken out of untreated control, and then one with ammonium sulfate in this case that looked beautiful. I was like, okay, it's maybe just an odd thing. Not thinking maybe a little bit of advanced growth because we have that benefit, and just kind of storing that in the back of my mind. And then 2 years later, I've got another trial that we're looking at CRI and the impacts of that carbon input that can have on soybeans, the good, bad, or indifferent. And, we're seeing changes based on the sulfur, but then we're also saying there's some differences in SDS. I remember walking with Joe, actually, with ISA, and so I need to go out and rate that. And so I got a good education from Darcy. I was like, okay, how to do this 0 to 9 rating on SDS severity, right? So it's our state fair disease that comes in usually around August. And I documented that those with sulfur had less SDS severity on the leaves. So in the last couple of years, Darcy and I have been chasing this, where she's been able to plant early, plant late with inoculated SDS. So basically you have sorghum seed that you bring in the fungus with it, right? With and without various sulfur sources.
And that's Darcy Talenko, by the way. We want to give her a shout out.
No, exactly. This is not possible without her doing that work, right? Mine are just one-offs. Like, she's our crop pathologist.
Yeah, crop pathologist at Purdue University, doing amazing work up there with both of you. So what was the feedback from the producers?
Yeah, so the story that's different now, that's all the lead-in, right? And so we did this SDS work, and we saw the same thing. We saw, okay, where we had infection, the severity was higher, but when we had our sulfur treatments, they reduced. So glorious, great data in that way visually. When we saw yield effects, one trial had just 2.5 from SDS, one had a 5 bushel yield hit. All the sulfur treatments brought that back up. So it's kind of neat to say that there's a new avenue, new side to this to help with a little bit of disease control, suppression, what have you. And we're starting to get into the greenhouse and in the controlled environments. Okay, what mechanism? So fascinating, fun to bring that out. Conversations were great, right? I was right before lunch, and I had an hour worth of conversations with, I've lost track of how many people afterwards. So there's a lot of good conversations, and got me thinking about some other things as well.
I know, Dan, you said that you had touched base with a number of agronomists from all across the U.S. You mentioned Georgia. You even mentioned several agronomists that you touched base with who were outside of the U.S.
Yeah. So, one thing, what's fun about the Commodity Classic for like Shaun and I is that we also hold our national agronomist meetings as state specialists, and so it's both corn and soybean agronomists. So, but on the first half day, we meet as all the corn and all the soybean agronomists together. So it's largely just a conversation of obviously what's going on in your state, what are you dealing with, what's going on, but also what are you seeing, what are you working on, what's working, what's not working, right? And then going even further down, we had a lot of talk on the quality side, right? Soybean quality and corn quality and where do we need to go to? So we have that, and then on the second half of the day, the soybean agronomists will meet, and then just this morning, the corn agronomists meet. So I've been largely involved with the corn agronomist group. This is actually about a year now that we started this group. So soybean agronomists, I think, is 2019.
So we've been around for a while.
And so
we were the soybean mafia before that. Now but now we're officially Science for Success, and USB supported as well. So
you could be the soybean sopranos.
Oh, it could be.
How about that?
Yeah, a little underlying story.
Yeah, a little alliteration there. So what are some of the major takeaways in your conversations with some of the other agronomists from, and I'm sure you're speaking with agronomists from Michigan State, from Oklahoma State, from Texas A&M. What's kind of the main challenge facing corn producers that you can speak to?
I think Brian could reiterate this. Probably the same sentiment from every state. Doesn't matter. It's the economics, right? It's profitability. It's the prices. But how do we approach that? And I think that's the main topic everywhere from a lot of the farmers' standpoint. On our side, we've been able to start working with National Corn, so NCGA has been supportive, and even today, what was fun today this morning is that we met as a group, but we also met with NCGA research ambassadors, which are students supported by National Corn Growers. National Corn Growers were part of it. So hearing their side and listening to them, and what stood out to me is there was actually a social scientist PhD student who we asked all the students, what do you want to do? And what stood out, she said, I'm going to Capitol Hill one day. I'm going to be a politician. And I said, well, we need to get in her ear right now.
Teach her right.
But it was that education piece, right? It's, how do we translate what we're doing? We talked about even like, with corn today, just how much better it is than what it used to be, right? Yields have doubled in a lot of places, but they've only used maybe 10% more fertilizer, right? What's that messaging that, because in this day and age, you can't believe anything. It's all crazy.
Well, you have 5 bushel here, 5 bushel here. Why aren't you at 500 bushels with all those add-ons, right?
Yeah, exactly. But just, how much better the crop is, how efficient the crop is, how much better farmers are today, So how do we relay that message instead of just, there's a lot of focus always on the negativity of things and not as much on the nobody likes hearing about positive things today, but
that's not clickbait then. You don't want to have it.
That really stood out, and we had conversations of how do we relay these things to policymakers and, all this stuff. So, I think, there's a lot of talk on the economics and stuff, but some of those conversations I think are what I really enjoy.
Brian, I want to ask you, I know that before we hit the record button, I asked, well, how soon will planting begin? And I think the joke was, it's going to be April 17th at 12:30 p.m. There's no way of truly knowing, but tell us about your preparation. Tell us about everything that you've got geared up, because planting season, you're going to be putting seed in the ground here before you know it, Brian.
I mean, mentally, I'm 45 days away. And obviously, soybeans will go in the ground first. And that's something that's changed. I guess what I wanted to talk about here real quick is this is my 27th crop that I've helped put in. And how it was then and how it has changed just in the last 5 or 10 years. And the knowledge and the education that we have in the last 5 or 10 years on how our crop, from the time it goes in the ground, that's the whole summer long, how we take care of it today is so completely different than it was 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago when I started.
Agreed.
And so I think that's part of that education piece. We're trying to, even as a farmer, we rely on agronomists and researchers, but like you said earlier, we're kind of the sure researchers, right?
No, you are. Right? I remember growing up, we were small time. We want to learn what twin row corn was. We just put the drawbar over one side, and I came right back and did it. So that's what you do.
There's your 7-inch row.
Yeah, no, it's what I did, right? I did that, right? So you're right.
I always joke, and we talk about this, so you wonder where we get a lot of our ideas from?
Right there.
Yeah. Right over here.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah. So, we start playing around and toying around with things like that, and we learn from that. And what works one year doesn't work every year. But I think it's just that, growing up, it was like you go plant the crop, you give it what it needs, and then, it didn't work. And now it's to the point, well, why didn't it work?
Yes.
Was it timing? Was it the wrong nutrient? Why was that? So I don't know if that's just how times have changed, or how the farmer may have changed, or that the information that we get is so much easier to access, I think.
Sure.
So absolutely. I'm going to ask you, Brian, like you mentioned stuff has changed over the last 5-10 years. What is there 1, 2, 3 things that stand out to you that like, hey, this, these are...
one thing, like if I look back 10 years and you said the word boron or zinc or sulfur, I'd have went, yeah, I know what they are.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm intimately knowing what they are today.
Sure.
And why I need them and when I need them. And so I think that's a lot of it. And you mentioned those 5 bushel here, 5 bushel here. I mean, is it the genetics of the corn, or the genetics of the soybean, or is it that we're taking care of
the system?
And letting those flourish a little more than we had 20 years ago.
I think back growing up in Illinois, it was like, just planting data alone. We've talked about this every year, but it's like, all right, you get corn in. Corn's king, right? That's why I grew up in the Midwest, and it's like, then you get soybeans whenever. But I mean, to your very point, I'm like, how much of you, the farmer, us, the agronomist, say, we need to push soybeans.
We get excited about soybeans just as much as corn now.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're the ones that make money, Dan. That's just how this works, okay? But corn's great too, but it is fun too to do this. Like, how can we push the envelope and not just do what we've always done? How can we improve?
And so much, I was going to say, like, too, on the understanding that, the genetics have gotten better, but I think we've gotten better at understanding the genetics. And then I always reiterate, what buttons to push in season and when to push them and what time and what rate. It's all. So we kind of understand the whole system a lot better.
Yeah, and I know we've been talking about nitrogen. I mean, we're so much more efficient with nitrogen than we were, in my forefathers. I mean, we are doing. I mean, we're at 0.7 pounds. Yeah. And back in the day, you got to put 1.2 pounds of anhydrous on, and that's good enough. Yeah. And how are we getting 100 bushel more now out of almost less nitrogen? And I think that's part of that equation.
Yeah. We're going to talk more. Actually, hold that thought, because we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to give some love to our sponsors: Indiana Corn Marketing Council, Indiana Soybean Alliance, and we're going to continue our chat with Shaun, Dan, and Brian here from Commodity Classic in San Antonio, Texas. I'm CJ Miller with Hoosier Ag Today on the Purdue Crop Chat Podcast.
This podcast is brought to you by the Indiana Forestry and Woodland Owners Association, working for Indiana's woodlands. Across our state, forests are more than beautiful spaces. They're living assets. When responsibly managed, woodlands can become a valuable part of a diversified farming operation. Healthy forests can provide income, support wildlife habitat, improve soil and water quality, and create opportunities for generations. Well-managed woodlands offer real financial benefits that can rival incomes from row crops. The Indiana Forestry and Woodland Owners Association is here to help you make the most of your forest resources. Learn how good management today can benefit your family, your land, and Indiana's environment for years to come. Find out more at ifwoa.org.
I'm Matthew Chapman, and I farm in Henry County, Indiana. Indiana Soybean Alliance and Indiana Corn Marketing Council invest checkoff dollars into building demand for corn and soybeans internationally. I've seen this work firsthand, and it's been eye-opening to see the growth in these markets, which also brings dollars back to our farms. Promoting U.S. corn and soybeans and increasing global demand is critical to the success of farmers right here in Indiana.
This message is brought to you by the Indiana Soybean and Corn Checkoffs.
And we're back on the Purdue Crop Chat Podcast. A big thanks once again, Indiana Corn Marketing Council, Indiana Soybean Alliance, and a shout out. I want to give one to Indiana Farm Bureau for their sponsorship and their support. Also, let's give a shout out while we can here at Commodity Classic in San Antonio, Texas. We are at the Purdue booth, which is actually the Purdue Center for Commercial Agriculture and the Purdue Center for Food and Agricultural Business. Once again, a big thanks to all the folks with Purdue University for letting us basically take over their booth space here at Commodity Classic. Big thanks to Dr. Langenmeyer with the Purdue Center for Commercial Agriculture. We were talking about some of the challenges facing producers, especially soybean producers, corn growers, which, by the way, Soybean Shaun Casteel is here. Dan Quinn is here. Brian Warpup, he is a producer, a corn and soybean grower in Huntington and Wells counties, a stone's throw from the Fort Wayne, Indiana area. And let's talk about, it's interesting because when I talked to my dad was a corn and soybean producer back in the 70s, 80s, and I asked him about tar spot. I asked him about sudden death syndrome. I asked him about some of those fungal pressures and pressures that corn and soybean growers face now. And he tells me, we didn't have to worry about that back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's fascinating just how new these pathogens and these pressures and these diseases have really ramped up in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, so I mean, sudden death syndrome, that's been around for decades, right? There's no doubt about that. But what's interesting when we talk about SDS and soybeans is also, okay, that symptomology, that state fair disease, guess what else? Brown stem rot has the exact same symptomology. Last couple of years, red crown rot's been popping a lot across Illinois, a few in Indiana. It has the exact same symptomology. So it's not only understanding that we've got these pathogens and these diseases, it's to understand which ones do we have, and then how do we manage that, and what can we do to get out of it? And then tar spot, I mean, that's just a fun one all the way around.
Yeah, tar spot is always at the forefront with the disease, but I always talk about the tar spot always takes like the spotlight.
Sure.
You can't forget about some of the other diseases. A good example, right, is something we've started working on is mycotoxins in grain, and we have a lot of work kind of up in Brian's neck of the wood at our Northeast farm. I talked because I just got the huge lab results back in my email today of all the mycotoxin analysis that we did on all the grain. So it'd be really fun to see what kind of management and looking at hybrid parameters and harvest timing and all these aspects. But mycotoxins is something that's been around a long time, but it's started to rear its ugly head and kind of, I would say, in Brian's neck of the woods, Northeast Indiana, East Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, up into Ontario a lot of times, and that impacts everything, right? With it impacts yield, it impacts ethanol, and it impacts feed.
Well, and I've had a producer tell me that those mycotoxin or vomit toxin, if I'm not mistaken, it can vary even within a mile. One corn producer could have that threshold that's, well, we can't accept your grain, and then another producer, perfectly fine. Just within a mile or two from each other. So we're seeing that variability with that as well.
Yeah, and so it comes back to trying to understand that. One thing we're looking at is hybrids. We're looking at ear length, husk coverage, husk tightness. All these things that could impact. How long does the ear stay up as it gets closer to harvest? When do we harvest? How do we dry it? All these questions that we have to try and answer, because that's the worst thing that can happen is you take a load of grain and you can't sell it, right?
Well, was it 3-ish, 4 years ago when it hit really hard?
23, I think.
And it just seemed like the crop took forever to mature for one on your side, but then mycotoxin had a great crop, right? Nothing's more frustrating. You get a great crop and then you get a mycotoxin or something like that. You ever experienced some of those issues? Right?
And you deliver it to the grain elevator and they won't take it, so you take it to the next grain elevator.
Exactly. You hope that they probe in a different spot,
exactly.
right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
It's fascinating because when I mentioned that 40 years ago, you didn't have those struggles with tar spot in corn or a lot of these pathogens that we're seeing, SDS and whatnot in soybeans, and you were shaking your head going, yep, I remember my first crop. You said this is your 27th crop that you're working on.
Yeah, and tar spot, it takes the spotlight a lot. Yep. There's still stuff out there. There's still stuff that we've always had, and we might not have monitored it. I'm in my field every week, and that's something that I am very disciplined in. Yes. And I was never disciplined in doing that. My dad was never disciplined in doing that. So I think that was part of that understanding the crop. I go out there, do you have a tar spot? Well, yeah, I do. Mm-hmm. Okay, now what do I do about it? Yeah. Whereas before, it's like, well, I don't know what to do about it, or there's nothing to do about it, or whatever, anthracnose, or you
my yield was off this year. I don't know exactly why.
Yeah, but my corn fell over. Why did it fall over? Yeah. Well, and there's a reason. Yeah. So I think isolating those reasons helps us become better farmers.
Yeah. I know that before we hit the record button as well, we were talking about some of the new technology here at Commodity Classic, and we're just a stone's throw from, I'd say, that's probably an 8-foot diameter drone, the spray drone that's just over yonder here, and we're seeing a lot more of that where the drones before were used primarily for scouting purposes. Now you can use those drones for spraying purposes, and then what you were telling me and what we've talked to spray drone operators is that a lot of them, you can now get the licensing yourself and spray and apply those crop treatments yourself.
Yeah, and from a farmer's perspective, that's a big change in the last 5 years. We just started talking about drones and you hire that service out for certain situations. Well, now as a farmer, we can all own a drone and all have that access to do that and all have that different timing now instead of waiting for a third person or a third party to be able to do that for us. So yeah, that's one thing here at the show. There are drones everywhere at this show, and I think that personal drone for each farmer is probably, it looks like that's kind of the way we're going right now.
I think it provides flexibility. You made this comment before the show started that it's like, okay, you used to do a lot with planes, and it's like, okay, you need a certain number, 400 acres, whatever, before I'm even coming, or you're on the schedule.
Yep.
Well, when are you actually going to make it?
Exactly,
and it's 14
and
days.
Too late.
So all of that versus, okay, you say, I call up my guy, we can go spray a 80 acre field and get it done and have that flexibility. I think that means a lot. Yeah. Timeliness is huge.
Yeah, so much of what we do is timing oriented, right? If you're a day off on some application, or it could drastically change those things. your response, right? And on the corn side too, just being able to get over top of it. We're doing more and more that is at tassel or just after tassel with fertilizer, fungicide applications. We're seeing the benefits. We're seeing hybrids today that respond better to those type of applications, period. So just being able to get over top of it and having that flexibility of something where you don't have to rely on an airplane, or you have to get a specific sprayer that's tall enough to get over top of it.
Or if it rains 3 inches and you can't get in the field,
exactly.
It's another tool.
Yeah.
Well, and how many passes of fungicide do you typically are putting forth?
At least one, definitely one. Mentally, 2. I mean, always being prepared, because you just never know. I mean, everything could be going perfect in July, and all of a sudden in August you have a 250 bushel corn crop and an 80 bushel bean crop, and something moves in, and now you're at the mercy of a fungicide or rescue fungicide.
Well, and I think about last year, southern corn rust. I mean, it came all the way up in your northern part of Indiana. It went up to your homeland in Michigan. And I think it even went into Ontario and Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, and those were areas that had never seen southern rust before.
Yep.
We always think of it as, obviously southern rust comes up from the south, southern half of the state, they worry about it. But yeah, it was moving all the way. We had it really bad up in La Crosse and northwest Indiana. Michigan had it. Those type, southern rust is a lot more later season type disease.
So to his point.
You can't. It's to your point. Like I always stress that you can't really take a day off not watching your crop, because everything's always changing and shifting, and it could change at a dime.
Yeah, pollination is the key timing. But yet we're talking about August and September.
Just out of curiosity, how were corn and soybean yields for you and those in your neck of the woods in Huntington, Wells County, northeastern Indiana?
In 2025, I don't know how it did it. It was the second best soybean crop I ever had. For the minimal rain we had in August, I really don't know how they did it. Corn was good, but corn was just kind of average. I don't think it had that top, and I think we had a little too much heat during the pollination period, kind of the fair time, to go over the top of that. But my beans, I couldn't have. I mean, it was a fun harvest on beans.
Yes,
absolutely. Yes. Well, I would imagine that's what we've seen a lot of drought stress over the past several years. I know you and many other agronomists have, and especially you've told me the soybeans are pretty much made in August. The dry June and July doesn't really hurt.
Not as bad, right? You get deeper roots and everything else. So it's. I mean, what we learned from our grandfathers, I mean, there's still some truths to like August makes or breaks your beans. Well, it's August and September for us now, and we're pushing the planting dates, but it's still that period, and so there's still some foundational truths that our grandfathers and our dads had that hold true today. But yes, I mean, I'd much rather have a compact soybean plant than one that's up to my chest.
It seems that the seed and varieties and everything that's available now, it seems like when I was a kid, I remember 1988 specifically, if I'm not, maybe 87, like a severe drought across India.
88 was a drought year.
1988 was a severe drought. I think 2012 as well. But back in 88, a lot of farmers lost. We're talking significant amounts of yield because of that drought stress. I'm kind of curious if the research and the developments that we've seen by all these different agronomists, including Shaun and Dan, the research that you both have done has certainly helped to provide those more drought-resistant varieties and seeds, correct?
Well, I mean, I'm not in development, right, in terms of genetics, but I mean, I certainly think both corn and soybean genetics have improved. Whether, I mean, you strictly there's corn hybrids that are drought-type hybrids, right, or more water efficient. But I think there's a resiliency with both of the crops with the newer genetics. I think when Brian's going out there with timely planting, getting good root systems that they can withstand, all right, we don't get rain from April, May, June, and then we finally get it in maybe August. And I go back to 2012. I was down 4th of July down Posey County, right down the river, and having a thermal gun saying the ground temperature was 135 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Air temperature was 100 degrees. And then when the soybean had a good taproot and then had the spot that had tire damage, so it was compacted. All right, so the leaf temperature was like 120 on that compacted zone. Where the soybeans had a root system, it was 87 degrees. So beautiful. Corn, same thing we had at the ear was 125 because it was so drought stressed. But it's about access to water, and so genetics, what he does in management to get a good root system established and not just slapping it in there and getting sidewall compaction. I think those are some big things to weather the storm.
A lot of
or
it's
the lack
back
of.
to stress tolerance, and the genetics are a big piece of that. But also on the management, right? If you manage a crop and you have a healthy crop, it's more stress tolerant than it would be. But yeah, they, the way they breed today and the way I've had conversations. I had conversations, I think, with some of the breeders at one of the companies, and they asked me, like, what do you want in a hybrid? And I basically said, like, I want something that's bulletproof, right? That's because we deal with so much, and it changes every year, and it's, you never know when it's going to happen. So yeah, it's a combination of the genetics, but also back to the point we see this time and time again. If you have just a healthier crop that's not deficient, it's going to be able to tolerate stress a lot better.
Well, I've been telling folks, hey, you see all this 9-foot tall corn? I'm talking late in the year.
Yeah.
See all this 9-10 foot corn now? In about a decade, it's going to be about half as tall. Is that true?
I think, the way short corn is evolving, I do think I think corn hybrids in general are going to be shorter, right? And there's going to be different aspects of, a lot of, I would say, the genetic modification trait of short stature corn we haven't really seen yet. So I think that's going to be involved with hybrids and all that. I still think we have a lot of questions and ways to go. But we've learned quite a bit working with short stature corn. We have evidence that the root systems are bigger in short stature corn, that they use nitrogen differently. We found that they have higher protein levels in the grain. Whether that has something to do with it down the road when you talk about quality and these aspects. But we see differences in their disease tolerance. Maybe so there's still a lot to learn. I do think corn in general is going to get shorter over time. It has gotten shorter over time. I would say that. We had a trial in southeast Indiana. We had hurricane remnants roll through. I could pinpoint every plot that had the taller hybrids in it, and the short corn was still standing. So I think there's a lot of that. It comes back to that stress tolerance, and that I think the short stature corn is going to be a part of that.
Absolutely. Brian, I know when you head back to Huntington County, if your neighbors ask you, let's say they didn't make it to Commodity Classic, but they ask you, hey, what did you learn most from your time in San Antonio? What's your response?
One thing that I've been hearing about, and it's where we're at in the marketing year, is markets. They're volatile all the time, but that's a lot of the conversation I've been having, and that's a lot of the breakout sessions that I've had, people marketing, because our margins are thin, and we're trying to we want to raise as much of each crop as we can, yield-wise, at an economic level. But when we're trying to market this, that's probably the key point right now, because soybeans were down, they're up now. Yeah. So as I walk around here and talk to my fellow farmers, that's probably the hot topic right now. But again, always, machinery's nice. As a farmer, we love iron. Yeah. And so anything new, that's what I'll take back. They'll ask, did you see the new John Deere 540?
Yep.
Yes, I did.
Absolutely. With a little grunt in the background of that Tim Allen.
Yeah, so I think that those key components will probably be the thing that I take back today.
A lot of conversations in your breakout sessions about policy.
Oh yeah, definitely. And Rollins will be here today. Rollins will be here today. So yeah, we always want to know what's going on in Washington, D.C. because obviously in 2025, that was a major. I talked about policy more in 2025 than I have my entire life combined.
Yep.
Maybe that's the position that I'm in, but it just seemed like when you said certain words.
Yep.
That come out of certain politicians' mouth, it kind of got everybody riled up.
Yep.
And did it affect us? Whether it's directly or indirectly, yes, it affected us.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, policy is a big one.
Well, and we can talk policy for another hour because you've got Farm Bill, you've got the Supreme Court's recent tariff decision, you have ag labor reform.
I didn't want to say the T word, tariff, so
He'll fall on the sword for you.
Well,
okay.
We're also talking with folks about E15, and we're talking about even on the policy side related to pork production and livestock production, that fix for Prop 12 in California. So there's a whole host of policy that impacts all of agriculture. It seems like that's
glyphosate too.
Glyphosate, absolutely. All of these things that are are impacting farmers on a day-to-day basis, and talking to those key leaders, I think is very important. And having those key leaders, you mentioned Brooke Rollins, U.S. Ag Secretary, having her here as well is very important. So once again, you can walk down the hallway. I did this yesterday. I'm walking through the walkway here at Commodity Classic, and I see Zippy Duvall, American Farm Bureau Federation president, and he's just shaking hands and rubbing elbows, and you see Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson, chair of the House Ag Committee. You see those ag leaders here, and it's great that they have that opportunity to come up, shake their hand, and say, hey, want to just briefly, tell you about this or that, and it's great to have those conversations here. Of course, so much we could dive into, but we got to wrap this up.
I think
we're
so.
having way too much fun.
I think brisket's on the order. We got to get a good Texas brisket before
A brisket?
we go.
Well, it's one thing. Greg Allen and I, we're going to try to hit an In-N-Out burger here in San Antonio, Texas. We had a steak last night, or at least I had a steak. So we're going to try to hit that up since we're here in this area, and there's no In-N-Out burger back in Lafayette, Indiana, or Indianapolis. So we're going to try to hit that up.
Down here, they probably say Whataburger.
Well, we did stop at the Whataburger at the San Antonio airport. That was our first stop when we got off the plane. Grabbed that nice, big, juicy Whataburger and scarfed that down before we made it here to the convention center. So once again, Soybean Shaun Casteel.
Thank you.
And Dan Quinn and Brian Warpup, once again, Vice Chair of the Indiana Soybean Alliance and a farmer from Huntington and Wells counties. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching the Purdue Crop Chat Podcast here on Hoosier Ag Today.
This has been Purdue Crop Chat, a regular series featuring Purdue Extension's Dr. Dan Quinn and Dr. Shaun Casteel, made possible by the Indiana Corn and Soybean Checkoffs, the Indiana Corn Marketing Council, and the Indiana Soybean Alliance. The Checkoffs are pleased to help bring you agronomy insights from Purdue Extension. Opinions on the podcast are those of the host and guests and not those of the sponsor. Purdue Crop Chat is a service of Purdue University Extension and Hoosier Ag Today. Timely, relevant, credible.